If you're looking for a decarbonized steam source, or what are your options today? There's two real options available today. One is too costly to implement. The other one is too expensive to operate. We looked at that and we said, okay, well, if we take the best of both worlds, we can now create a drop-in, plug-and-play solution, also operate with such high efficiency that the cost to electrify is as close to natural gas boilers as possible today. We're talking about nearly 200% efficiency because we're pulling in heat from ambient air and supplementing the rest through electrical.
Welcome back to Clean Techies, the #1 podcast for climate tech entrepreneurs. Today I'm speaking with Ashwin Salvi, COO and co-founder of AtmosZero. Yes, that's right, the same AtmosZero that just closed a $21 million Series A round in February of this year. A lot of people talk about decarbonizing industrial production, but let's be honest, most of us have no idea what that means. Well, today we learn a little bit about that, including that used in a huge number of things is steam, including production of paper, textile production, pharmaceuticals, the food and beverage industry, and a lot more of those heavy industrial use cases like you're familiar with, like plastic, metal, and chemical production. Yeah, it's crazy. It's everywhere. Steam is used in so many things. Well, steam is produced by boiling water, obviously, and a lot of these boilers use some form of gas or coal, and AtmosZero is electrifying that. In today's conversation, Ashwin tells us how they are solving the cost issue by making a drop-in replacement, how they built their pilot at the same scale as their commercial unit, the trade-offs between building in stealth versus building in public. They chose to build in stealth. And he finished us off with some business ideas that were actually pretty interesting. So before you start the show, if you listen on Spotify or Apple, leave us a review. It's immensely helpful. And if you're listening on Substack, drop a comment with your favorite moment. Okay, enjoy the episode. All right, welcome to the show, man. How you doing today?
Oh, I'm doing well. It's good to see you again. Thanks for inviting me here.
Yeah, absolutely. Super excited to have you on and discuss what you guys are working on. So give us a quick intro for people who are unfamiliar. Who are you and what are you working on?
Yeah, sure. Hey, my name is Ashwin Salvi. I'm one of the co-founders, the chief operating officer, and the head of business development for AtmosZero. At AtmosZero, what we do is we create drop-in electrified boilers to replace today's boilers in the industrial setting. Today's boilers burn natural gas or coal, depending on where you are, to make water hot into steam and use that steam for other processes like, bringing beer to a boil, using that to sterilize different processes, doing it for cleaning in place, etc. We've been making the steam the same exact way for the last 200 years, and it's about time that we go ahead and revolutionize that. It accounts for 8 to 12% of global CO2, so it's a huge impact. What we're creating is a standardized drop-in, plug-and-play solution to help decarbonize that.
Nice. So just to kind of clarify, you're saying that there's quite a lot of industrial settings where steam boilers are used.
That's right. Yeah. So what's interesting is, and notionally why this has been such a long-term problem is because industry was always deemed hard to decarbonize. We make so many different products in the industrial sector, if you will, that you can't just decarbonize one and have that process scale to something else. For example, the beers you had for dinner last night, the toothpaste you used this morning, the clothes you're even wearing today, all touched by steam in some way. And so it's, if you look at industry as a whole, all these different products end up being a different way to approach decarbonization. But the real unifying thread is that all of these processes use heat of some sort. And in general, they use steam. And if you can decarbonize that steam process of how do you make steam today, you can have an outsized impact on global CO2.
And just to clarify, the process you're decarbonizing is the heating of the steam, or you're decarbonizing the production of the steam, generally speaking?
Yeah, decarbonizing the production of the steam. So,
Okay.
Replacing boilers today that burn a fossil fuel and that transfer that heat to water to make into steam. And again, that's used, in the food and beverage industries, chemicals industry, pulp and paper, district heating, pharmaceuticals, etc. Steam is just this huge lifeline of the industry.
That's pretty fascinating. I mean, I guess it's not that obvious to somebody who's not in the space that steam is involved in so many things. I mean, everybody knows that there's energy and there's different raw materials, but it's quite fascinating. So maybe we'll learn a bit more about that. I am curious. Everybody who becomes an entrepreneur usually has some kind of like origin story. Like, what was your specific earliest, first hustle, or where did you first get your taste of actually making money for your things that you come up with?
Yeah, well, interesting question. Yeah, I guess my early influence is probably my dad. He started a company. He's a physician, and he just started a company around a subset of his specialty, primarily because what he was doing just didn't fit right with him. He didn't like the lifestyle. He didn't like the stress it was putting on his family. But more importantly, he just had more to contribute to that by making his own company out of that. I think that's kind of what's translated to me. I've never quite really fit into the status quo of different companies or different opportunities. I didn't look to be an entrepreneur just to be an entrepreneur. I think a lot of people
Hmm.
fall prey to that. They think it's sexy. It's, oh, I'm an entrepreneur, but it's really like kind of how I ended up coming this way because it felt right. We saw an opportunity that no one has been doing this before, and we filled a gap in the market that said, okay, well, hey, look, if we can do this, this could be really impactful, and that's what's really driving the mission of AtmosZero is to have an impact on industry, on decarbonization. This is a world I've been living in for 20 years. On how do I work on something in the clean tech or energy space and actually have it commercialized and do some positive good out in the world, while still providing a service for our customers that they ultimately need to have a business that's cost effective, as well as achieving the goals they're striving to achieve.
Yeah, and I guess something I haven't asked a lot of people on the show yet, but I'm going to try to do it more. Is who are the people in climate tech that you generally look up to? Are there any particular role models or people you follow?
Yeah, okay, that's an interesting one. I guess for that, I can give you a two-part answer. First part, like current climate tech entrepreneurs or businesses, really. And when I think about that, it's really the people that are out there doing something. It's not talking the talk. It's not well, it is, but it's also walking the walk. Like the folks that are actually taking technology from lab, from research, and transitioning that into the marketplace, because that's where you really make impact. And that's what's really been driving me. That's what I really got into when I was at RPE. I used to be a fellow at RPE about 10 years ago at Department of Energy. Really, really got turned on to commercialization. Got to work with a lot of fantastic companies and learn about how do they take some of the advanced concepts that are working on and look at the marketplace, the opportunities there, and then transition that product or that technology they're working on to something that can actually commercialize and make real world impact, whether that's what they originally had started off as a project or an idea in their mind, or they pivoted to something else. And that's fundamentally what's been a big part of my career since then. I went and joined another startup after Department of Energy before AtmosZero, and really learned a lot about how do I interact with clients and learn about their needs and their skill sets, and how that can play in with what we're offering as a product too. And so
Yeah,
that was part one of the answer. Part two is I kind of look historically for some of the other folks that have influenced me, and what I really think about is like Nikola Tesla, like George Westinghouse. Like, Tesla is just, I still don't think we fully understood who that man was. Like he could just dream and imagine a solution in his mind and build it, and it works exactly the way he thought about it. That is fantastic. Like that is just like brilliance in my mind, and then also able to actually build it and prove it out that it works out. And then Westinghouse, of course, being able to commercialize a lot of this technology and strategize around how do I have a concept and make that concept into a commercial product and effectively just take over the industry with his ideas and pull in the resources he needed to pull in to do that, to make it successful, right? So that's just who I kind of think about historically as being like these
yeah.
people that really have laid the foundation of our life today. The Industrial Revolution, and that was over 100 years ago, right? That's just fascinating to me that they were that influential and that kind of uh, you know futurist, if you will, to be able to lay
Yeah.
the foundation for our life today.
Yeah. Are there any particular resources or books that you would recommend for people who are interested in learning about them?
Oh, there's a ton of books. Man, now I gotta remember the name of this one off the top of my head. The Empire of Light or something like that.
Okay.
It's a story about Edison and Westinghouse and Tesla from back in the day. That's a fantastic book about how these people came up and the inventions they created, how they were influenced back in the day. I mean, literally, like no guiding principles, just like fundamental theories that they would validate in lab and just
Yeah.
build things, test things out, see what works, what doesn't work. that was an incredible book.
Yeah.
I'll follow up with you and let you know what that was if I got it wrong.
Yeah, I'll make sure to get it in the show notes. I think that'll be interesting. I actually have never heard anybody reference them, but now that you say it, it makes a lot of sense that we should follow and reference them. So that's really awesome. I appreciate that. Okay,
A quick Google search later, it is Empires of Light.
Empires of Light. Okay, very good. So you mentioned a little bit before you guys stumbled upon this opportunity and basically decided there was nobody really working on it, so you're going to do it. Tell us more about the origin of how AtmosZero was born then.
Yeah, I would say it's less stumbling upon the opportunity. It was really like a crafted thing. So Addison Stark, I worked with him back at ARPA-E. Actually hired him there. He's our current CEO. He came up with the idea during the pandemic. This whole idea again of industries hard to decarbonize. He really dug into it to say, is it really, and why? And again, it goes back to that everyone's looking at it from like raw materials to end product, and not really breaking that process apart. And he was the one that really said, man, like heat is a huge part of a lot of industrial energy needs, and a lot of that heat is in the form of steam. If you can just make the steam, and we're talking about anywhere from 100 Celsius to 200 Celsius, a really, really small range, 100 Celsius, maybe 225 Celsius. That's about 50% of industrial heat needs, right? That is 8% of global CO2. You actually don't need to do very much in terms of creating a product to be able to satisfy that temperature range and still have a technology that can be mass manufactured and scalable to really have that big impact that we're looking for. And that's kind of where the insight is. Like, hey, if you can decarbonize steam, you can decarbonize industry, you can decarbonize district heating, you can decarbonize built environments. And if you can standardize that product, which is what we're doing, we can now also get into mass manufacturing, bring economies of scale into play, and really achieve nice cost down curves and mass market availability of our technology.
Hey guys, sorry for the interruption. I just need a few seconds because Soma and I have two quick favors to ask. Putting out the show each week takes about 15 to 20 hours between us, so it's a lot of effort, and it would mean the world to us if you would leave a review and mention your favorite episode. Secondly, if you're not already, go over and subscribe to the podcast on Substack. The content is free, but if you like hanging out with us each week, maybe we're even the kind of guys you'd like to buy a coffee for on occasion, consider becoming a paid subscriber. For the cost of one lavender latte a month, you can help us immensely. Thank you for tuning in consistently and helping us to share our guest stories. Now back to the show. So then what is the steps once he understood this to be kind of, hey, this is an opportunity here. What steps do you take to get to where you are today? Just like the kind of the big bullet points.
Yeah, so once that idea came out and we got the team together of there's three co-founders, Addison Stark, Todd Bandauer, who's our CTO and also an associate professor at Colorado State University, and myself, the chief operating officer and head of business development. We got together and started kicking the tires on this thing and said, why hasn't this been done before? What is the incumbent technology today? What are the challenges with the technologies out there today, and what's preventing them from mass market adoption or scaling and having the impact that decarbonized solutions should have? And really started to say, can this actually work, both technically and on the commercial side of things, to the point where we had enough conviction to go out there and start fundraising. And so we started, fundraising in October of 2021. Got a seed round around April 2022 to the point where we can actually go and dive in deep and quit our full-time jobs and hire a team to go and really chase this down. Say, is this a feasible thing? We have all three of us, the co-founders, have PhDs, engineering. We have the technical chops to really understand that, hey, there's nothing limiting us from doing this. We just need a few innovations and development in a certain few areas. So number of miracles, less than one required. And that's how we were able to fundraise. And we showed the market opportunity here to our investors, who are awesome. Our seed round was led by Starlight Ventures, and Energy Impact Partners came in. Fantastic team. We were able to flesh out our technical team, start doing simulations, start building hardware to really prove the concept out.
Okay, got it. So just to make sure I understand this, once you validated the market idea, understand, hey, I think that there's no main reason why this shouldn't work. And I'm assuming that was a lot of conversations with the market. And then you went out and raised money and then used that to kind of dive in fully And then before you build anything, you're able to do a lot of this kind of with computers to understand, hey, does this make sense scientifically? And then you go and build prototypes.
Yeah, so actually, we did a lot of that simulation prior to getting that
Okay.
funding too. We were able to, you know, you want to do more than just back of the envelope. It's helpful when you actually understand the thermodynamics and the heat transfer required to say, yeah, okay, this is. There's no showstoppers here. It's hard, but it's not to say that it's unfeasible. So we were able to leverage that into our fundraising to say, hey, VC, here's why we think we can do this technically. Here's the market opportunity. Here's our current team and our expertise and our background of working in startup environments or commercialization or technology development, et cetera, to really paint the picture of we've got a pretty good understanding of how to work on what needs to be done to make this a valid product and then take that into the market and also to build a team that is required technically and commercially to do that. And that was really what was impactful for our initial fundraising.
Okay, yeah, I like that. I mean, basically, what you were able to do is take away that kind of first layer of risk, which is usually what a lot of early founders don't do, and they don't understand. Hey, they say, "Oh, I need money to take away the risk," but you could do the de-risking. If you really believe in it, you should do the de-risking at least to some level before you raise, which makes it a little bit easier of a conversation. Still, probably not easy to raise, but a little bit easier.
Absolutely, and that also comes with the experience that the three co-founders come in with, right? I mentioned I'm close to 20 years of expertise in the climate tech world. I worked in the startup world before. I've worked from in the fundamental lab to learn the technology, and then I've worked with C-suite all the way down to ground level engineers in massive companies to commercialize my technology. Being able to talk the full kind of spectrum of how this technology is going to be developed and scaled out to industry is also really impactful. And the same thing for my co-founders too. They have industry experience. They've got experience with commercialization, with project management, with building teams, et cetera. Everything you need that can be helpful to investors to recognize that there's real gravitas here.
Mm-hmm. So, slightly fast forwarding because I understand you guys you've gotten some nice contracts lined up, but you guys have been successful is my point so far. And I want to ask your opinion on what founders should do when they're in that process that you guys were in 2021 of deciding whether or not we should move forward. What are if you were to narrow it down to a couple principles, what are the things founders should make sure are true or ask themselves before they go out to start raising money?
Okay, interesting question. So there's always going to be question marks that you'll have in your head about, is this going to work? Is the market really going to adopt this technology? And this is where have you heard of iCore?
Mm-mm.
Okay. iCore, it's this great, I think it's NSF led team for a lot of early stage startups. And what they really focus on is you talk to the industry, you talk to the customers, you talk to 100 different people, and you have to figure out ways to talk to these folks so that they don't just give you the answer you're wanting to hear, but they're actually
Mm.
giving you truthful feedback. So it's called the mom test. It's great. The
Yeah,
idea is,
I know that. Yeah.
yeah, the mom test. And so just more data points you can get from talking to both industry of what their needs look like. Is this a real opportunity? How big of a problem is this for the people you're talking to? Or are you solving such a small issue for them that, yeah, maybe you can have the best advice out there, but ultimately it doesn't really contribute to their goals? No one's going to buy it. Um, just talking to as many people as possible and then just kicking the tires technically to understand, hey, am I going to need a perpetual motion machine to make this thing work? Or, where are my strategic markets of entry, which take a while, right? We have a thesis that we came in with, and it's been 2 years. It's changed a bit since our initial round, right? But having at least thought about it and try to test that thesis or hypothesis really on the industry and the market opportunity is super valuable.
Okay, got it. So basically, two things: talk to the market a lot, and then understand, do some level of kind of technical de-risking if you can, just to make
Absolutely.
sure that you're not shooting darts into the air that just are never going to come back. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah. Okay, so this is interesting. So let's go into the tech a little bit more. Again, I'm not somebody who understands this, so explain it to me. Explain to me like I'm five. How does the tech work? And then we'll get into it from there.
Yeah, so when we looked at what if you're looking for a decarbonized steam source as an industry member, what are your options today? Uh, what it comes down to is the options. There's two real options available today. One is too costly to implement, and then the other one is too expensive to operate. And when we looked at that, we said, okay, well, if we take the best of both worlds, the easy to deploy but the higher efficiency option, so that it doesn't cost our customers an arm and a leg to decarbonize their steam source, we can now create a system that can actually be a drop-in, plug-and-play solution, so easy to install, but then also operate with such high efficiency that the cost to electrify is as close to natural gas boilers as possible today, right? That way, we can create a solution that if you are an industrial member and you have multiple facilities globally, you don't have to do a custom engineered solution per facility, which ends up costing a lot of money. You have engineering costs, you have labor, you have hardware you have to deploy, and each facility looks different, so you have to do that work for every single one of these facilities. We can create a standardized product that all you need to do is effectively plug in electricity, put in the water that you already give your boilers today, and we make steam in our device and plumb it into the building. And it's a standardized way to approach decarbonization, but also increase the efficiency of that, so that, again, the cost of going to electrification is much, much lower, or more in line with that of natural gas boilers today. So really kind of looking at the barriers to adoption for today's solutions and eliminating that by product design. So fundamentally, yeah, go ahead.
A quick follow up here to make sure I got this. So there's a system in place in a certain industrial manufacturer of some sort. You're building a solution that's external. You don't have to go in and kind of replumb the entire system. You can basically, let's call it, plop it outside of the building and plumb it in without having to disrupt operations probably very much. And this solves the issue of too costly to implement, and will also give super high benefits on lowering the cost to operate. Is that correct?
That's 100% right. So to maybe add a little bit more clarity, the two technologies that I'm referring to are, today's solution, if you want to decarbonize steam, are electric resistive boilers or electrode boilers. Those things have efficiencies of less than 100%. They work, and that's what industry is really looking to and adopting today to help them decarbonize their manufacturing. The other option are things like waste heat driven heat pumps, which, quite frankly, don't have a presence in the US. It's more of a European thing. That's that costly implementation of a facility specific technology where you have to go and be really intrusive to existing processes, potentially even shutting down the facility to go and get that source of waste heat to make steam. What we're doing is using an air source heat pump. So instead of going and getting that waste heat source to upgrade that to make steam, we're just using the ambient air, so we can physically locate our device outdoors, using heat from ambient air all the way down to -4 Fahrenheit, -20 Celsius, and upgrade that to make the steam temperatures relevant for manufacturing processes. What that does, it keeps the cost to implement extremely low, but because we're a heat pump, we're about twice as efficient, depends on the steam pressure we need to generate and the ambient temperature, than electric resistive boilers. So we're talking about nearly 200% efficiency because we're pulling in heat from ambient air and supplementing the rest through electrical. So that's how we're able to keep our efficiency high and keep the cost of operating our system low because of that heat pump advantage, and keep the cost to deploy and implement really low because we are just a standardized system that looks the same in the US and looks the same in the EU. All I need is electricity and water. That's it.
And there's a huge benefit, obviously, to that, meaning you can mass produce these rather than have to have a project engineering team for every single one, correct?
That's exactly right. All the components look exactly the same. And what's nice is now you can standardize the way you implement and integrate to facilities. You can standardize your operating procedure for these things. You can standardize spare parts. You can quickly deploy our technologies because they're mass manufactured. There's going to be more existing products out there as opposed to custom engineered solutions. And so if you're trying to hit a, say, 2030 goal, other technologies out there take a long time to custom build and implement. We can decarbonize your technology, your facility, in a much faster timeline and a much lower cost.
Yeah. And roughly, I mean, you may not have the exact numbers here yet, but what are you kind of projecting in terms of the return on investment for how much lower the operating expenses are going to be?
Yeah, for sure. So, things like electric resistive boilers, which are today's real standard solution, we're talking about payback periods of less than 3 years compared to that technology.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
I mean, What's really unique about the industrial sector, I guess not unique, but shouldn't be surprising, is that these things are running day in, day out, all year round.
Mm.
So if you can have some amount of savings in terms of efficiency on the operating costs, especially with electric pricing, you can generate lots of savings for the customer.
Okay, got it. So it's pretty clear then who buys these. I mean, this is just any industrial producer of something that uses steam that doesn't have some like out of the range kind of standard heat requirement. Then my question is really on the people who are buying this. Does the current incentive structure with IRA factor in at all? And how are you planning to make sure you're not reliant on those incentives in the future, if that's even part of the equation?
Yeah, that's a great question, and so this goes back to kind of our history and background in climate tech. And when we started this company, we wanted to have a product that was going to be out the door in less than 3 years from the inception of the company. This is because we didn't want to fall prey to the typical startup where you're always in perpetual R&D and you're iterating, and never really getting product in the customer hands. I firmly believe you learn the most with a product in customer hands. And so we started when we built our first prototype, we built it at scale. So our first product is the exact same scale as our prototype. So it's a high capacity, 2,000 pounds of steam per hour kind of system that's built in our facility today, and that we're doing continuous work on. It's making 150 Celsius steam all day, every day, and we're learning from that. We're de-risking that in our own facility, and so that when we put our first product out, we're just repackaging a couple of different things, and it goes out to the customer. And so we've de-risked as much as we can in our facility, so that we can have a product out the door with some amount of reliability and durability that we have confidence in, right?
How are you building your business model to not be reliant on anything like industrial decarbonization credits?
Along the same lines of, how do we get a product out the door, we also recognize that we don't want to be reliant or dependent on any sort of subsidies or incentives, both domestically or even internationally, to commercialize our technology. That's why we are really focusing on this mass manufactured approach of saying, how do we get to a standardized product that we can keep the integration the same, so that reduces implementation cost, as well as be able to mass manufacture a product so that we can get economies of scale to bring the cost down, of course, so that we can have a technology that can scale globally. And so, the IRA absolutely helps in terms of deploying technologies or reducing risk for the customer, but we're not banking on that being critical for our commercialization, because we want this technology to be self-sufficient.
And just to clarify, who does the buyer get the credits for decarbonizing their operations? Because I know that some of them are transferable, so I just want to understand if you have a handle on that.
Yeah, so there's a few different ways of looking at some of these incentives. You've got tax credits, you've got DOE funding opportunities, where they can fund demonstration projects. And so if you look at the demonstration project side of things, it's like the capital of the equipment would be 50% covered by the DOE. So we had that with the Office of Clean Energy Demonstrations, OSED for short, which I think was a fantastic. It's a fantastic organization, the DOE, and a fantastic funding opportunity to really kind of go and hit the market hard and say, here's advanced energy technology, go implement this. We're going to take 50% of that risk, and just show that the system works, and really start making strides towards implementing really awesome technology, and start making strides towards decarbonization. The other side of things are, and so that's like a one-time thing. The other kind of stuff is like 48C or tax credits, where people like myself, AtmosZero, can actually apply for a production tax credit, where we can use that towards building a facility, uh, um, and starting to manufacture our product in large numbers. Or if you're an end consumer, a customer, where you can actually apply for the investment tax credit, where you can get some amount of money back for the capital you would end up spending on some of these advanced technologies to help decarbonize your process. So, in general, the person who benefits kind of depends on who's implementing, and the approach that you're taking, if it's a PTC, production tax credit, or an ITC. And then also, of course, when you get that tax credit, I think there are other markets where you can capitalize on that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
instead of yourself.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting to build with the future in mind, to not be reliant on that. I think that there are unfortunately a lot of people who are not doing that. So it's good that you guys are focused on the future with that. I'm curious, what are the core objections or challenges for companies to say, yes, we want to work with you? Like it sounds everything is fine and dandy, but I'm sure there's some objections. What's the common one you run into?
Yeah, just like with any technology, you're going to have folks that are early adopters, mid-stage adopters, and laggards, right? We talked to all of them. I think, again, understanding the perspective from people that are super, super excited about what we're doing to folks that are going to drag their heels until they have to, just to be able to understand who's my current market opportunity, what am I skating towards, what does my product need to be able to achieve in the future to help get larger adoption. This is all being utilized internally to understand our MVP, our minimum viable product that we're going to go to the market with, and understand what do we need to get to with product development in the future. And so, what folks look for are going to be different. There's companies domestically, internationally that really value decarbonization, really value cost competitive solutions for decarbonization. And they can reflect that in their product, or they're being driven to do that in their product because of what the consumers are looking for. And I like to give the example of pharmaceutical companies. It's going to be challenging for pharmaceutical companies to continue to make healthcare products when they have a CO2 signature associated with it. They're selling a product that's meant to be betterment for your health, but then you're also adding more CO2 to the environment because of that. And we've already
Hmm.
shown that that's not going to be good for your health. So it's these kind of weird, but also logical kind of drivers for commercial adoption.
So everybody has their own particular kind of reason behind wanting it per se, and then the challenges. It seems like there aren't necessarily too many challenges because of the way your technology is created, that you don't have to shut down operations. These things are pretty, like, you've removed most of the friction. It sounds like, correct?
Correct. I mean, you're always going to have some challenges somewhere. We're in electrification technology. So if you look at a facility and, Andrew Luberjan from EIP has coined this term. I love it. You're going to be entering the electricity gauntlet, where
Mhm.
you might need to upgrade electrical capacity in certain facilities to be able to support the kind of electricity you might need for these boilers. What's nice part about AtmosZero is that we're actually cutting the energy required to decarbonize steam quite a bit compared to things like electric resistive boilers, because we have an efficiency multiplier, right? But then there's going to be areas and sectors and markets maybe that even just doing an upgrade, it depends on your facility, right? If you're a large steam consumer, it doesn't matter how efficient your technology is, you're going to need a lot of power to be able to electrify that. And so being able to source that power and actually get that in a meaningful timeline is one of the challenges that we are burdened with. But we're helping to reduce that issue by increasing our efficiency compared to competitive technologies, but also to make sure our system uses low voltage. So we're a 480 3-phase, which is very standard in the industrial setting, whereas our competitive technology, or competitors of ours, are using medium or high voltage, which require upgrades to electrical distribution in your facility, require a lot of safety gear and stuff like that, where
Yeah.
just ends up costing more and ends up adding more to your timeline. That's, I
So,
think, probably the biggest challenge. And there's going to be some areas where cost effectiveness is going to be challenging. If we're comparing against natural gas and going and using electricity, there's some areas where the spark spread is it's just really challenging.
yeah. So broadly speaking, for the companies who are looking to electrify, the challenge, they should already be dealing with this if this is their plan, but they're trying to procure more energy, and that can have its own challenges with the grid itself. But you're not requiring them to do massive upgrades of any of the equipment on site. So it's really just a matter of the bottleneck being, is there more energy on the grid, which is not in your scope of work, right? So that makes sense. That's I figured there was something that's it's interesting to consider. I want to talk a little bit about fundraising. Just you've already kind of told us a little bit of the story of de-risking, but can you give any particular stories from the fundraising that were really helpful for other founders to know, and any particular pieces of advice that you learned through that?
Yeah, absolutely. We've raised our Series A back in late January, early February this year in 2024. So we've gone to a couple rounds. My number one piece of advice is this: talk to as many venture people as you possibly can. Right? It's kind of a numbers game in the sense that, like, it takes some time to get your rhythm down, understand what's hitting well, and what other folks or venture folks want to see in a pitch deck, or what's valuable. So there's going to be some iteration, especially when you first start off. You start off with an initial deck. You'll probably get a lot of questions back. You'll tune that, get that in front of as many eyes as possible, just to fine tune your pitch. The second piece of advice is have a good team, right? Like, I think our team, our founding team, and the team that we built, we were almost 28 people now, is just absolutely fantastic, and that just adds more to the credibility of the technology that you're building, de-risking that, as well as the commercialization that your plans and the way that you're planning on actually getting this product out the door. Just really helps sell that vision to the investment world. Yeah, I think those are my top two, and then just have a thick skin. It's going to
Yeah.
take some time. It's probably going to take longer than you might imagine to get a good term sheet. Yeah, I guess that's the other point. Be very picky about the investors that you choose to do business with, right? We have been very, very fortunate. I mentioned Starlight in EIP, Engine Ventures, 2150, Constellation came in on our Series A. We have Anu as well, that was strategic with our seed round. These have all been fantastic partners, and they do so much work with us and for us, with introducing us to customers, relevant suppliers, helping us to get in touch with other folks for hiring, for example. They're just and helping us think through strategically about how do we market, how do we price things, what are some of the other points where you need to start thinking about putting resources before it becomes an issue, thinking further ahead. The team that they're very much a part of the team and the company itself. Investors should be a part of that conversation.
Mm-hmm. So you talked about team several times here. What have you done or I guess I should say, where have you gone to find most of the talent that you've brought in to build this this team of around 30?
Yeah. So, in the initial rounds, we were stealth for a long time, probably a little bit more than a year. And that was very critical in the first phase when we're doing a lot of technical work. So hiring is a bit of a challenge when you're stealth. People try to do some due diligence on you and they don't find anything, which I guess means that we were successful at being stealth, right? And so a lot of it was network based. The three founders, me, Todd, and Addison, we actually all used to work together at DOE. So me and Addison used to work at RPE. And when we were there, we funded Todd through an RPE award. So we really got to know who he was and the quality of work that he's able to do at Colorado State University, for example. So that when the founding team came together, it just made sense. We've all effectively known each other for a few years. We know what our strengths and weaknesses are. It was that easy. It's the same exact thing when we're building up the technical team or the other aspects of the team. In the beginning, it's just like, we've worked with so and so before. We know they're awesome. Let's see if they're interested in joining a quick to market startup. Since then, since we exited stealth, it's been a little bit easier because we've been getting a little bit more market traction, a little bit more news, so that folks are actually seeking us out, and the folks that are applying to our job postings are either referred word of mouth, or they actually naturally find it. And we've had some fantastic hires that way too.
Yeah. What kind of companies do a lot of this talent come from? Because I'm always curious. I mean, this doesn't seem like super novel technology per se. Like, it's not completely out of this world that it doesn't exist. So there's other people, I'm assuming, in adjacent places. What types of companies are they coming from? Is it engineering consultancies, OEMs from other, like GE or something like that? Where do people come from?
Yeah. And so kind of all over, we do have folks that have come from consulting world in terms of like technical consulting, other previous HVAC industries. Oil and gas has been fantastic for us. We build shipping container size things, 8 foot wide, 20 feet long, bracketing metalwork. So welders are fantastic. Pressure vessel codes, all things relevant to the oil and gas world have been super critical for us. And that's anywhere from PhD level on down that we need in terms of resources. It's been a kind of a full spectrum of folks that we've hired, and they've been fantastic, right?
Yeah, that's quite interesting. I think there's a lot of, I'm curious, there's a lot of people who want to leave oil and gas and come to work in something in clean tech. Are you finding that a lot of them are open to taking pay cuts to do that? Like, is that, I don't know if you're open to talk about that, but I'm curious because I know that typically they're paid quite well.
Sure. So, we're for being a startup, we pay very well. We realize that our technology is dependent on the team of folks that we have, and so if we can't hire the best, or if we can't retain the best, then we're potentially jeopardizing our future as a company and as a product. So we understand that. Look, people the good people are going to cost a little bit more, and so we're offering competitive startup salaries and packages and equity, et cetera, to make sure that we get good talent.
Okay, cool. So you guys, can you talk more about this kind of first installation that you're going to work on? Just talk about how you landed that and just anything else you want to share about it.
Yeah. So our first commercial deployment, it's happening in March of 2025. That's with a company called New Belgium Brewing. They make absolutely fantastic beer. Fat Tires, possibly one of my favorite beers. So they're actually just a few minutes walk from our headquarters in Fort Collins, Colorado. And what's been nice about that is we've had an ability to kind of build a relationship over a few years. So we really got to know the company, and we got to know what their mission is. They're an absolute trailblazer in terms of decarbonization, or really making a product that is sustainable, both as a for the people that work in New Belgium, but also for the environment and the people that they serve to. They're very conscientious about that. So we got to talking and learned a little bit more about their heat needs, and understood that, hey, this might be an interesting fit for what we're working on at AtmosZero, to make steam so that they can use that steam in their kettles and their clean in place facilities. And so we proposed the idea of a pilot with them, and naturally they were excited about that too, because it's helping them achieve their goals that they're trying to get towards, and also helps us out because it's a way that we can prove our concept out outside of our facility. I mentioned this earlier in the talk. The moment you can put your product in customer hands, that's when you learn the most about it. Your customer learns the most about it, understands the pros and cons. How does it tie into their system? You can identify any sort of improvements that you can't do in your own facility.
Mm-hmm. So in the process of this kind of securing this potential, this pilot and other LOIs that you've worked on, what has been the biggest learning experience you've had from running those sales, especially in terms of shortening the sales cycle and getting people interested in, not saying something that in reality we both agree, but we kind of missed the point each other and we skipped. So I just want to get that learning advice, because there's a lot of people kind of going into this journey right now.
Yeah, that's a great question. And this kind of comes back to what we mentioned a little bit earlier. You just need to talk to a lot of different customers. And that way it helps you kind of parse out what's some of the motivation for certain customers versus some other ones. And what are their solutions for us particularly? What's their path forward to achieve the goals that they're talking about? You know, I mentioned electric resistant boilers earlier on. If I'm talking to a customer that's about to buy an electric resistant boiler, the sales cycle is super easy for me, because I can just go in there and say, I can give you a payback periods of less than 3 years and save you hundreds of thousands of dollars per year. How does that sound? But you've also validated that they're interested in decarbonizing, and they're interested in electrification, right? So you've already said, all right, these people are making a decision to do this. They have a technology that makes sense for them right now. I can go in there with a better value proposition and still help them achieve their goals in a much more cost effective way. And so being able to talk to all these different customers, you can find out who's doing that today. And it may not be that. It might be like they're buying renewable natural gas or something like that to help decarbonize, but that's also very expensive. So by being able to satisfy their main objectives of decarbonization, and to do it more cost effectively than they're doing it today, we're able to identify kind of a beachhead market or initial customers that time to sale, or that conversation goes a lot faster than maybe someone that isn't as motivated.
So do you usually approach it initially as, hey, we're trying to do discovery around this, or do you kind of go at it more of like a salesperson would, kind of, hey, we've got this thing, we want to talk to you? How do you get them on the phone initially?
Yeah, so very different story when we were in stealth mode versus when we exited stealth. In stealth mode, it was discovery. We were still trying to understand what is exactly required from our product, what is the industry looking for, how do we fit into that, who's our market, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's a lot of discovery, saying, hey, would love to chat about your heat needs. Not selling them something. I don't believe in selling something. I believe in helping people solve their problems, right? And so if you can just pose it as, I just want to learn so that the thing I'm working on could be the most appropriate for what you might be looking for in the future, and just get data, as much data as you can. And the data that you're starting to get will change with time, as you find out what's more important or less important to understand as you iterate through your product team or your technical team. when we exited stealth mode, and so that was a lot of direct outreach, as a direct lot of like I'm going to a conference. It's targeted to the industries that I think are my strategic industries, and just learning from that. Once we exited stealth mode, what was really kind of fun was the amount of inbounds we started getting, because we had a couple of press releases go out. A few of them caught some pretty nice coverage. People are just like, "Wait, you have a steam generating heat pump? I've been looking for this for 10 years," and they're just like, "I didn't know you existed." I'm like, "Well, we didn't until 2 years ago." And so being able to have that conversation, and seeing people light up when they're like, "Well, you literally are solving a problem that I've been struggling with for so long," has been really awesome, and has actually turned the table about, we're getting inundated with inbounds of how do we, when can we have a product ready to deploy, and the commercialization conversation ends up being a lot easier as you start
Yeah.
getting more and more of the conversations and doing more and more of your technology development in your facility.
Out of curiosity, having gone to start in stealth mode and then kind of emerging from it and seeing this flood of inbound interest, do you think that building in stealth was the right choice? Because I know there's kind of a debate about this.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it depends on the market you're in. Like you mentioned earlier, there's nothing really super, super challenging about what we're doing. It is challenging. There's components that don't exist. That's why this product doesn't exist yet. We've had to use our own secret sauce to fill in the blanks, right? So if we went out public in the beginning, you could have potentially seeded some competition. Like the major OEMs, they have a lot more resources that could absolutely pick up on what we're working on and maybe get to the market faster than us. By being stealth, we were able to get far along enough and develop our technology, and even be able to find a customer. And then when we exited from stealth, announce that customer. That was our ability to really kind of leapfrog the competition.
Hmm. It's kind of interesting that your first customer was also a direct to consumer. I mean, I know they sell direct to consumer and through other retailers, but because it's almost like a marketing benefit too, because all of their loyal buyers are like, oh, interesting. Like maybe they care about climate or maybe they don't. I know a lot of people who like New Belgium for that reason because they're very leading edge. But that's kind of an interesting play, is to think about, similar to getting the right VCs who can help you with certain things, getting the right first partner who can also help get the word out about what you're doing.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, look, I'm so grateful for New Belgium. They've been very patient with us. Like you mentioned, finding that right partner, maybe also just in life, that really kind of works with you and helps you also help, partially create the product with you, so that it can satisfy the needs that they're looking for, is absolutely critical. And they're patient, which is really helpful, because they also understand that we're a startup. We're in the midst of doing technology development, and the folks that are at New Belgium are effectively like thinking like a startup themselves, like, hey, this is cool, we really want to try this, and if we can do this, it really helps along our mission and helps our customers. So this is absolutely what we're interested in doing. um, and I don't see that mission changing for them. That's why I think they're such a fantastic company to work with.
Yeah. What are the core things you're excited for in the next? I know you got this deployment coming up, but in the next year or so of the company, what are the core things you're excited for and the core challenges you're looking at?
So I mean, absolutely, number one is this deployment, right? Like, to me, that is far number one, and so that's got to be, that's got to go well. Where I'm excited about deploying this in March with them, and really showcase the technology in field, in revenue service with a customer. They can decarbonize beer. That's going to be great to cheers to. After that, building our team even more than we are today. We've got manufacturing that we're scaling up. We've got a lot of customers after that are taking effectively the same product we're making with our first customer, and scaling that to two other applications. We started in the food and beverage industry. Two other applications are in the chemical space. That's showing the versatility and the scalability of what we're working on, because it's quite literally the same exact product. It's a standardized design.
Nice, man. I think that's great. One last thing before we run is, having worked in this space for a bit, what are your core ideas or opportunities that you see in the space for other people to build? It doesn't have to be deep tech. It could just be simply a service or something, because there's a lot of opportunity, I think, as the industry continues to grow. So I'm curious if you have any particular ideas or opportunities that you see.
I think I've got two right off the top of my head. Number one is going back to that electrical availability. as a whole world, as we continue to electrify, that's going to be the biggest limiting factor is power generation, distribution, and things like transformers and inverters, switch gears, availability and timelines of those devices is going to be super important to help accelerate, because that's going to limit the deployment potential. In part two, because I deal with this a lot, I would love a service that can aggregate all of the different funding opportunities, like you mentioned earlier. Don't need it, but doesn't hurt to have it, and say this is what you need to do. This is what you could potentially gain from it, and just kind of centralize that, not just like DOE or IRA, but also incentives with utilities to help deploy decarbonized solutions, or et cetera, because they're all very state by state, sometimes city by city, and it's really hard to keep track of all these different opportunities. So I think number two would be something that can help me think through that.
Is that largely focused on government funds, or is that also working with actual venture arms?
So some of it is government funds, like DOE and the IRA, but the other things like the utility incentives, those are separate.
Interesting. Very good. Well, I will plug them for you. I don't know if you've already heard of them. Streamline Climate does a lot of this, helping with this. At least they don't necessarily find them all, but I think they're a pretty good product. But this has been really awesome, man. I really appreciate you coming on, and I'm really fascinated by the technology. Offline, I might have to try to see if I can make some intros for you in Wisconsin, where I'm based now. But where should people reach you, and any calls to action for the audience?
Yeah, you can reach me, at my first name, ASHWIN, at AtmosZero.energy. It's my email address, or you can just go to our website. There's a little contact me form at AtmosZero.energy. That's our website. And I'll leave by saying I love what we're doing as a society today, and what I'm seeing out of the DOE and the IRA. This is the most funding I've ever seen out there. And what I'm most just thankful and appreciative of is the people going and deploying, doing really hard things that isn't necessarily sexy. What I like to say in my team is that we work in industrial heat. It's not sexy, but it's hot and steamy.
Very nice. That's good, man. That's a great way to wrap. All right. Thanks so much, man.
Thank you. Cheers.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome to the takeaway section. Wow, that was full of valuable insights. Because it was so jam-packed full of information, I want to take a moment to re-highlight a few things that he said. So get out your notepad, and especially do so if you are a hardware founder. Early in the discussion, he mentioned how he looks up to Nikola Tesla and George Westinghouse. I think this is a very good example of studying how the titans of industry that have gone before us have done things as we build the industry of the future. So quick shout out to people like David Senra from the Founders Podcast and Ben Wilson from How to Take Over the World for their relentless work of studying former role models. If you guys like that kind of stuff, I would highly recommend checking out those podcasts. They're actually some of Soumil and my favorite shows to listen to on the weekends. The second thing that Ashwin had mentioned was there are two core things you need to ask yourself as a founder when you're in the idea phase after you settle on something that you think has legs. The first one being, speak to the market a lot. Follow the MOM test. If you're not familiar, that's a book you can read on how to ask the right questions so that you get the right answers, not just the answers that people want to give you to get you to go away. So speak to the market, follow the MOM test principles, and understand their reaction to the technology, understand their pain points, understand what needs to be true in order for them to adopt that technology. Secondly, do as much simulating of the technology as you can prior to going out to fundraise to de-risk the tech. There's a lot of software opportunities to de-risk and kind of test out your hypothesis and your engineering ideas. Do that before you go and raise money, because it's going to be a lot easier to have those discussions if you've really put in some work already. The investors will also really respect it. Third thing, so when you are designing your approach to solving any solution for the market, keep two words in mind: scalable deployment. Because their solution can be mass manufactured, they can actually have a huge, huge impact. If they had to design a new product or kind of re-engineer every single installment, it would take them substantially longer, and they would just not have the same impact that they can, given that they are able to mass produce these. The fourth big takeaway: incentive independence. So while the IRA is helpful for them currently and the different incentives there, their business model, because of its scalable deployment, will allow them to reach economies of scale and not be dependent on any subsidies or incentives. So while you're kind of designing how things work, make sure that if you are involving, the IRA incentives as part of your business plan, don't become reliant on that. Otherwise, there's a very good chance it won't work in the future if these things go away. The fifth thing, acquiring customers. So this is more of a tactical one. The main thing that they did to get in front of customers and secure LOIs and eventually land their first pilot was through reaching out to do discovery calls. This is something that he did. He did primarily when they were in stealth mode. They would use that because they couldn't say what they're selling something. So first of all, use discovery calls. He also mentioned attending the right conferences. So figure out what area or what conferences are really important for your space and then attend those. And then finally, direct outreach. You could call it a theme. He mentioned several times throughout the show just talking to a lot of people. He talked about it with investors, with landing customers. Effectively, what I'm trying to say here is put in the effort and be resilient. Expect to have a lot of conversations and just kind of plan that into your calculus as you're building the company. Don't think it's going to be easy that you call 10 people and you land a customer. It's going to take some effort. There was another point that I wanted to bring up, which I think is maybe something to just consider for yourself, is he mentioned that they started out in stealth and then with their first pilot project, they announced and went public, and they had a lot of traction of inbound interest in what they were doing. He said it depends on the technology you're working on, but if you're somebody who is debating whether or not to build in public or to build in stealth, just maybe reach out to him for his take on it. But consider that, because building a stealth may not always be the best thing in order to get some more traction and make things a little easier, depending on your technology risk and how big your moat is. Okay, so the seventh thing, startup ideas. He closed us off with a couple actually really, really interesting ideas. The first one was solving the electricity issue for industrials. And what I mean by that is he talked about as they implement their technology, any industrial who's going to decarbonize is most likely going to be going off of some form of process that's going to then become going to end up using electricity. So in general, their electricity demands are going to increase. They're going to need more electricity. The problem with that is there's just not enough electricity on the grids, or it's taking a long time to do the grid upgrades to supply these users of electricity. So while this is a very, very challenging startup idea, if you can find a way to help kind of streamline or help industrials get more electricity by solving the grid issue, the bottleneck, you can make a really big impact, because you're allowing anybody with a technology similar to AtmosZero to kind of go down the adoption curve faster. More people can buy their product. The second idea was he wants a place that generates all of the funding incentives and opportunities. Think utility incentives, government funding opportunities, calls for pilots with corporates. If someone could aggregate that, it would really speed things up a lot, he said. I think this was really interesting because it's relatively a scrappy idea. I think most people could probably do this if they put their mind to it. It's not extremely complex. You just got to go find it, aggregate it, and find a way to monetize it. So maybe there's a kind of $1 million weekend startup idea for you if you're trying to build something in climate. All right, take care, and we will see you next time.